On the morning of December 2nd, 2008, police received a 911 call about a baby. When police arrived, the scene was even worse than they could even imagine. A very heavy word of caution. This case is very hard to listen to. Listener discretion is highly advised. It's the case of the murder of Amora Bain Carson, right now on Love and Murder. Welcome, lambs. Welcome to a new episode of Love and Murder, your weekly true crime podcast telling you cases of heartbreak that turn to homicide. I am your host, Kai, and in today's episode, we're discussing a case that took me a long time to research, a long time to write, an even longer time to record. Recording, literally, I procrastinated till today. I just recorded this because I just couldn't. And I know it's going to take me a long time to edit this because of the content. I really had to take breaks and separate myself from this case. I don't think people really understand how hard it is to relay true crime cases. This case is particularly disturbing. It has extreme child abuse. I'm giving you one more warning of listener discretion before I begin. Speaking of before we begin, I just wanted to remind you that this episode and all my episodes is sponsored by my lambs in Patreon, patreon.com/Love and Murder. I want to thank you as always for your continued support. Some of you have been here since the beginning and you keep holding down the fort. And even the ones that came after, thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe to Love and Murder right now while you're listening so you don't have to miss a case. And if you didn't know, you can also subscribe to our Patreon so you don't have to hear intros or commercials, and you'll get Kai Rants. It's daily, semi-daily, but you get extra episodes like Kai Rants. You get monthly bonuses, and you'll be a sponsor of Love and Murder. You'll also get episode extras, so like with this episode, you'll get pictures, evidence, court records, court appeals. I think there's some videos. If not, some episodes do have videos. I can't remember if this episode does, but you do get episode extras. All this for being a supporter of LAM. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. In the meantime, though, grab your butts, grab your apple juice, your BJ's apple juice, murderandlove.com/BJ's, and let's get into some Love and Murder. Amora Bain Carson was born on November 12, 2007 to Arlene Mutina and Jessica Carson. When Amora was born, Arlene had been serving in the military, so he only got to see his daughter just a few times before him and Jessica ended up separating. Amora was described as a really quiet baby. She rarely ever cried. She only cried like if she needed something. She wasn't one of those babies who just cried and cried and cried for no reason. At this point in time, Jessica was living with her mother and her brother, and it was just a good situation for her. She had people to help take care of Amora, and she had people who supported her. After a while, she met a man named Blaine Keith Millam. Now, Blaine, a little while after they met, offered for Jessica and Amora to move in with him. And Jessica thought that was a good idea because she felt like she was struggling and a single parent, and she just wanted somebody's help, which is weird because she lived with her mom and her brother, and they were already helping her. So at 17, she moved into Blaine's trailer home in Longwood, Texas, thinking that this was what's best for her and her baby. Now, Blaine himself was only slightly older than her, and his background was not the best. But if she had taken time to get to know him, she would have learned that. Blaine had his first drink of alcohol, hard alcohol, when he was 13. And by 15, he was drinking, quote, a pint of schnapps per day. Then by 16, which is only a year older, he had started using meth. And when he wasn't able to get meth, he would get Vicodin or crack or embalming fluid. He would take PCP. He would take LSD. He would take just whatever he could get his hands on. Now, according to Jessica, and I guess through her rose-colored glasses, Blaine seemed to love Amora, and she thought he loved Amora more than Amora's father did. As time passed by, Jessica seemed to change after moving in with Blaine. She really stopped contacting her mom and her brother, even her friends, and when they tried to reach out to her, she wouldn't answer the phone. Whenever they did see her, they saw that she went from being a well-dressed, caring mother to looking dirty, looking frazzled, looking unkempt, and she seemed, quote, unconcerned about her appearance. Friends also reported that her demeanor went from happy and carefree to, quote, weird, hollow, like empty. And that looking into her eyes was like, quote, looking into a dark space. They also recognized that Blaine was the one who was now in control of Amora's life, as Jessica really wasn't taking care of her daughter, which that's also a change because she was a doting mother and now she's just leaving the baby for Blaine to take care of. Another thing that was unsettling is that she was always with Blaine. Literally, always with Blaine. When he was at work, she would stay there. And this wasn't really her decision. This was because Blaine was really jealous and very controlling, and he wanted to be able to watch her all the time to make sure that she wasn't cheating on him. And other than following him around, she was never allowed to leave the house alone. So she would just always be home. So that was it. He wouldn't allow her to leave. One day, Jessica purchased a Ouija board so she could, as she puts it, communicate with her dead father. Now, her father had committed suicide when she was 10, and she was the one who found his body hanged. So this stuck with her for a long time, and I think it's kind of the reason that she's the way she is. She's kind of, you'll see what I'm talking about. So she got this Ouija board thinking that, she was going to, quote unquote, as she puts it, talk to her father. And she started saying that she believed that her mother was responsible for her father's death. So she would walk around telling people that it was her mother who killed her father. Then after that, the other thing she started telling people was that she thought that, and this is just complete delusions, so she's clearly not in her right mind, but she said that she thought that demons had possessed Blaine and was in their apartment. Now you would think, okay, she needs to go into a mental hospital. However, Blaine also believed that demons possessed him. So we have the only two adults in the apartment thinking that demons were possessing them. Nobody's able to come and look after the baby. Nobody's actually really knowing what's going on. So the only two adults that are in the apartment who is supposed to be watching Amora are going off their rocker. Now, I'm wondering if this is mental health issues or if it's drugs. I'm thinking for Blaine, it's more drugs that possibly turned into mental health issues, meaning the drugs ate away at his brain and he's probably still on drugs. But what about Jessica? Did she start using drugs with him? Now, they later moved out of their trailer in Longwood and into another trailer in Tatum. And when the landlord went to check the Longwood trailer, he found nothing but a nasty, disgusting mess waiting for him. He found that there was this light bulb that they had turned into a container to be able to smoke meth in. He also found that there was rotten food in the refrigerator that they just left there. And there was a knife hidden in the tank of the toilet. So he found drugs. Well, he didn't find drugs. He found a light bulb that probably had the residue of crystal meth in it. I already know Blaine is using. So does that now tell me that Jessica's using? And of all things, meth? Not saying anything else is good, but my God. So on December 2nd at 10:30 a.m., 911 call came in. Quote, "My name is Blaine Milan and my daughter, I just found her dead." This was the legit 911 call. So police were dispatched, and when they got there, both Blaine and Jessica told them that they had gone to look at land to buy, and when they got back home, Amora was dead. They have no idea what happened. She was just dead when they got back home. Now, my first question as a cop is, you say you both left and the baby was home alone. Is that correct? And so she was born on November 12, 2007, and this is only December 2nd, 2008. So she's literally just turning 1. She's like 13 months. And the baby was just home alone. And you were surprised when you got home that she was dead? This is me as a cop if they were to tell me that. So they basically matter-of-factly said, yeah, she was home by herself. And we're thinking that somebody broke into the trailer and attacked her. That's the only thing I can come up with. So when police went to look at the child, they're looking at this child and looking at the adults and looking at this child and looking at the adults. And the child was lifeless, just dead, blue, lifeless. And the shocking part of it, not that they left her home alone by herself at 13 months, not that they're so callous about this, like, yeah, we leave our child home alone all the time. Isn't that normal? So those two aren't the most shocking things. The most shocking thing about this was the child had 24 human bite marks all over her body, and also red and purple bruises covering her entire head. So police immediately wrapped up the child and took it to a medical examiner. Medical examiners revealed that she had suffered horribly and terribly before she died. She had been beaten until her skull fractured and her brain was damaged. She had limbs that had been twisted in two. And he reported that her torso had been hit with a blunt object or squeezed together until her ribs and her sternum broke. Do you know how hard it is to break a sternum? In all, she had 18 rib fractures. Her head was so horribly beaten that she had been bleeding in her eyes, and her tongue was lacerated, and she had been beaten so bad that her liver was damaged. Do you know how badly you have to beat somebody that their liver is damaged from an external beating? Her private parts were so damaged that her anus and her vagina had become one opening. It was no longer two separate openings. It was one opening. And this happened before she died. During his investigation, the medical examiner couldn't even determine which one of her injuries was the final cause of her death. So now police are really looking at Blaine and Jessica. Blaine kept to his story when he said that he and Jessica had left Amora alone in the trailer, and then when they returned, they found her dead. Then as police sat there staring at him, he then said, well, you know what? She's not even my daughter. She's Jessica's daughter. She's just, my girlfriend's daughter, and they live with me. But I'm, quote, raising that baby. So in Jessica's interview, she was telling investigators that, her baby, quote, hit itself in the head with a hammer. She also said, quote, it was attacked by dogs. She also said that when she came home, she, quote, didn't find it in this condition. And she also tried the whole, maybe it was, quote, injured in a car wreck. So after an hour of all of these, she took a deep breath, and the police officer who was investigating her said he noticed, quote, a pretty drastic change in her demeanor, and she had, quote, stopped crying and acting very distraught. And instead of calling the baby her baby or her dead daughter or Amora, she referred to the baby as, quote, that baby, and stopped acting like she really cared about it at all. Then she told the officer the true story of what happened. She said Blaine was the one who brought this Ouija board into the house, and she really didn't want the Ouija board in the house. However, one does not argue with Blaine, so she let him do it. He said he was bringing that Ouija board in to talk to his dead father, and that was one of the things that she liked about him because they shared the fact that both of their fathers had died. So she thought, well, maybe if you're doing that, maybe I can do it too. That's what she thought. She said when they started using the Ouija board, she was afraid that, quote, she would be talking to bad spirits through the board, is what she says. And so she said while they were talking to whatever, she had a feeling that it was a bad spirit and that, as she put it, it entered Blaine's body. At the same time, some other weird thing happened on the very same day that was really, really weird to her. Amora took her first steps. And Blaine was like, that's not normal. She shouldn't be walking already. And he said she was, quote, too young to walk. So there could be only one explanation for this. And that is, as he put it, a demon had gone into Amora. Probably the same one that had gone into him, as he said. So he said the child was like, quote, Chucky or, quote, Pet Sematary. If you don't know, these are two horror movies where basically in Pet Sematary, the boy died and this guy buries him in a pet cemetery, and supposedly the boy comes back to life and then starts killing everybody. And in Chucky, I think he was a serial killer or something, but he died and supposedly he took over Chucky's body and was killing everybody. And he said this because Amora was, quote, biting Blaine to where it was drawing blood on his hands, which I completely and utterly highly doubt. I have been bitten by a child many times. An infant, a toddler, because that's what children do, and they have never drawn blood. So he decided that it was his duty to remove the, quote, as he said it, demon from the baby. And he said he was going to do an exorcism. Now, my question is, you thought it was in you. Why aren't you doing this to yourself? She said he did not allow her to watch this supposed exorcism, and he took Amora into a room and closed the door. She could, quote, hear the demon cry out and scream out, and then she, quote, heard a lot of banging. But she said she didn't move. She stayed on the couch for about 30 hours as this was happening. She sat there on the couch and let it happen and didn't move for the most part. Maybe she got up and got some water. Maybe she went to the bathroom, but she sat there and listened to her child screaming and crying and hearing a lot of banging. Then, after 30 hours, Blaine came out and he said that he needed to hire a priest for this, as he said, exorcism, because according to him, this wasn't working. So they needed to go out and sell some household tools and get money to be able to hire said priest. So that's where they were, and they weren't out trying to buy land. They were out trying to sell some household tools to make some money to hire the priest to finish with what they called an exorcism. So police arrested them immediately, and they were on a $2 million bond. Now, let's take a break, a short break. I honestly don't want to put a commercial in this episode, but number one, I still have bills to pay. I have to pay my bills. And number two, I literally and honestly with you need a mental break real quick from what I'm relaying to you, because I'm really trying to keep it together right now. So with that being said, first of all, thank you for listening to Love and Murder. If you would like to support me to help me keep the content flowing and get access to exclusive bonus episodes, you can literally join my Lamb Supporters Club today. In season 4, I give you multiple ways to join. You could join through Patreon, you could join through Spotify, and now you can join through Spreaker. The link to each of these platforms is in the episode description below, and you can join whichever platform feels right for you. Your support makes a world of difference to me, and I want to thank you so much for being part of the Lamb podcast journey. You don't know how much you help me out, how much I really appreciate my lambs, and how much support this brings me in giving episodes such as this to you. The reason I give these episodes is to shed light on what's going on with the victims and shed light on what happened to the victims, and hope that if you know anybody going through even remotely the same things, that you see these signs that these victims went through, you see these signs, and maybe you can help somebody before it's too late. This is the reason for Love and Murder. So I want to thank you for supporting me. And also, if you want to continue supporting me, like I said, you can become a Lamb supporter. The links are in the episode description below. Just choose whichever platform you feel most comfortable with. The true crime podcast I'm highlighting this week is Murders and Mimosa. Murders and Mimosa is a true crime podcast focused on lesser known crimes and cases that keeps us up at night. Each episode is scattered with a bit of sarcasm, but with tons of in-depth research. Join this mom and daughter duo as they sip their mimosas while diving into tragic true crime cases. New episodes drop every Saturday, just in time for brunch. And a mimosa of your own. And you know, I wanted a virgin mimosa. Murders and Mimosas, you can find their link in the show notes below. We now resume our regularly scheduled program. So a little while goes by and the manager of a pawn shop comes forward and lets police know that Jessica and Blaine on December 2nd had come to his pawn shop and pawned an electric chainsaw. They told her it was, quote, for money to pay a priest. Then investigators went and searched the trailer. They found blood-stained bedding. They found blood splatter all over the room, baby clothes, dirty diapers, and wipes. On December 13, Blaine's sister Teresa went and visited him in jail. And when she came back, she told her aunt that, quote, she was, quote, needing to find a way to get back out to the trailer in Tatum because, quote, Blaine had told her that she needed to go out there to the trailer to get some evidence out from underneath it. So the aunt, being the OG that she was, immediately called 911 because, Teresa, what in all the F's were you freaking thinking? that you were just going to go get some evidence after this little baby was killed by your brother. You were going to protect him? Are you kidding me? So the aunt wasn't like that. She called the police immediately and told them that, quote, they needed to get out to the trailer immediately, that Teresa wanted to go out there and get some evidence from underneath the trailer. So the police obtained a search warrant and they went under the trailer where the aunt told them. And under the trailer, they found a clear plastic bag. And inside that plastic bag, they found a pipe wrench coated with Astroglide. So Astroglide was the same lubricant that the medical examiner had found in Amora's bloody diaper. And they came to the conclusion that Blaine had hid this pipe wrench under the trailer because this was used to cause, quote, the extensive injuries to the genitals. And this is what ripped them up so badly. So they took it to forensics, and forensics revealed that the components of the Astroglide on the pipe wrench and the components of the Astroglide in the diaper that Amora had been wearing. And remember I said they collected diaper and wipes? So it was a dirty diaper and dirty wipes. So they found that the Astroglide on those were all the same thing. So basically now they had a confession. They had part of the weapons. I'm not going to say the murder weapon because we don't know if this is what killed her, but still, it's still evidence. They had all of her dirty clothes with all that blood splatter and the Astroglide on it. They saw all the evidence in the room, everything. So, of course, they went to trial. The trial started in May of 2010, and it was actually moved out of their little town and moved to Conroe because of pre-trial publicity. Judge J. Clay Gossett presided over the case. District Attorney Michael Jemerson and State Assistant Attorney General Lisa Tanner called several witnesses, including the medical examiner, to the stand. Now, Blaine's attorney completely blamed all of this on Jessica. He said Jessica was mentally ill and she was responsible for the child's death. Once again, still waiting on an attorney that I could speak with who knows your client is guilty. This dude brutally murdered a 13-month-old for 30 hours doing horrible things to her. You know he's guilty. Everything points to him. But in your little lawyer brain, you just want to win a case. And so you decide to blame it on the mother. Just so you could win a case. Don't want to have an interview with one of y'all. Not saying all lawyers are like this. I'm just saying these specific ones. Another person who was called to the stand was Heather Carson, which was Jessica's mom, and she testified about Jessica's demeanor, how it changed from her moving out of her and her brother's house to moving in with Blaine. She said, quote, her daughter had become quiet, subdued, and stopped taking care of her personal appearance. She also said her daughter had stopped talking to her and her brother, and she hadn't heard from them since November 2008. And that was because she had gone to visit them at their apartment, and that was the last time she saw the baby. So when she was asked if Jessica had experienced postpartum depression, she had said no, her daughter had been a good mother. Quote, she did everything for Amora. She also emphasized that Jessica's demeanor never changed until she moved in with Blaine in August of 2008, and that really concerned her. They also brought some of her friends to the stand, like Lisa Taylor, and she also testified that Jessica was an amazing mom before, but after she moved in with Blaine, she was acting, quote, a little weird. She also said that at one point in time, in November 2008, Jessica, Amora, and Blaine had stayed with them for a little while. They had actually planned to move to Alabama, and she had agreed to help them find jobs and a place to live. But after 4 days, they just literally just up and left and went back to Texas. She also said that while they were at her house, she witnessed that it was Blaine taking care of Amora, and for some reason, Jessica didn't take care of her at all. Now, this came out in the investigation, but it was also revealed during the trial that Blaine was actually not supposed to be around any children that weren't his biological children because of some previous crimes that he had on his record. For instance, he had gotten in trouble for breaking into a house, and he had walked into the bedroom of a 13-year-old girl, and he went through the girl's underwear drawer. Then he cut out pictures of an adult magazine and wrote notes on how he wanted to perform sexually indecent acts with this girl. For this, he was charged with second-degree felony and criminal solicitation of a minor and sentenced to 180 days in jail. He was also told to register as a sex offender. Now, he ended up not spending the entire 180 days in jail, and once he got out, he never registered as a sex offender. Now, how does this work? Aren't you supposed to, once they get out, aren't you supposed to check on that to make sure that they did register as a sex offender? That's interesting. I thought that was like part of people's probation, that they're required to register as a sex offender. I guess their probation officer or somebody is supposed to check and make sure that they did. You don't just leave it up to the sex offender, say, hey, Billy, you need to register as a sex offender and I trust you. I don't think that's how that works. On day 3 of the trial, this is when the medical examiner testified. In his testimony, he said that Amora endured inexplicable pain in the last hours of her life. Her injuries were so extensive and severe that he said they were the worst he's ever seen inflicted on a child in his entire career. Quote, this particular body was, I guess, shocking is the word that comes to mind. This medical examiner's name was Dr. Keith Pincard, and he was the forensic pathologist at the Southwest Institute of Forensic Sciences in Dallas. So you know he's seen a lot. He said all of her injuries happened while she was alive, and some were hours old. He testified about the bite marks all over her body, from head to toe, from back to front. And he said the marks were consistent with a human tooth tearing the skin. A forensic dentist came in and also confirmed that the bites were human. Now, all they had to do was take Blaine's dental records and match it to the bite, and then look at his stupid-ass lawyer and ask them, again, tell me how it was Jessica and not Blaine? Like, literally, that's all you had to do. Dr. Pincard also testified that, like I told you, she had 18 rib fractures. She also had multiple fractures on the back of her head. She had extensive bleeding under her scalp, the lacerated liver that I told you about. She had a broken arm, a broken leg, and a bleeding blood vessel in her neck, which he explained to the court meant that that's a sign of strangulation. So I'm saying it's a possible strangulation, not definitely. He said all of her injuries were from blunt force trauma, but he couldn't figure out what object was used to cause this blunt force trauma. But he told the court that a couple of things jumped out at him about Amora's body. He said that her face was covered with scrapes and cuts, quote, to the point that the abrasions were all touching each other. Meaning, when he looked at her face, it looked like it was just one huge bruise, but it was so many different ones that it made it look like one huge injury. And he also said that her genital areas was just one big hole. It weren't two separate holes any longer. And he said she was sexually assaulted. Quote, I've never seen anything like it. And so when they asked him if it could be caused by male penetration, he said it was more than likely caused by an object. Quote, were you able to tell what injury caused the death? No, there were so many injuries present. But he said on his report, he did list the cause of death as homicidal violence. During the trial and during Dr. Pincard's testimony, they also had photos of Amora's injuries. So as he's talking, he's pointing out the autopsy photos for the jurors and the court to see. And you can see that this really, really bothered the jurors. I can't even imagine. I'm just relaying the case without these kind of pictures, and it's bothering me. Even recording this episode, I've been taking breaks and I go look at my social media and then I come back to recording it. It's just hard. One of the male jurors put his head down and covered his eyes. You can see some of the jurors crying, but Jessica never even looked at the pictures herself. She never even turned her head to look at the pictures. The next person that came to the stand was Dr. Patricia Rosen, who is a medical toxicologist. She said the toxicology report showed that Blaine had 0.17 milligrams of meth per liter of blood in his system. And then Paula Ludberg Love came in, and she's an expert in pharmacology. And she testified that meth users experience paranoia and hallucinations because of the drug. So she said that it's possible that both Jessica and Blaine, quote, started believing there were demons that were changing the facial structures of their child. These kinds of abnormalities could be maybe related to the abnormal behavior in meth users. And she said pairing meth with Jessica's state of mind, which according to Dr. Frank Murphy, she was in a psychotic depression. So have that paired with meth use, and it's easier for the court to believe, or it's easier for the doctors to believe that she was really, quote, hearing the demon growl. According to Dr. Murphy, before she even started using meth, it appears that Jessica developed this depression, and it was probably because of being in this kind of relationship where this guy was really controlling of her, and she wasn't even allowed to leave the house unless she was with him or sitting at work watching him, or always with him. So she became very depressed. That depression turned into a psychotic depression, and then she started using meth. And even with the psychotic depression, the doctor says that more than likely she would have began to hallucinate and lose touch with reality. And then on top of that, the other doctor explained what meth does. So that's even more hallucinations. So with Jessica, it was more to the point of a psychotic break and drugs. So then Amora's grandfather on her father's side, Richard Mutina, addressed Blaine in his victim's impact statement. Quote, no matter what punishment you receive, you will not suffer the way my granddaughter did. I don't hate you. I hate the acts you committed. You're getting off easy compared to what Amora got. And I think I said Amora's father's name was Arlene. I meant Arlen. Sorry. Judge Gossett told him, quote, it wasn't easy to go through. Our appreciation for you cannot be overstated. If jury duty fails, then our justice system fails. This is what he said he started off talking to Richard, and then he finished off speaking with the jurors. He also offered to pay the jurors for counseling services if they needed it, quote, about what you've seen and heard for this case. In closing arguments, District Attorney Michael Jimerson told jurors that this is, quote, Amora's story, not Jessica's. It's not about how tough Jessica Carson had it. Amora can be more than a blood source object. And while he was doing his closing arguments, he had a picture of Amora's body that was at the autopsy, so you could see exactly how badly she was beaten. He then, during his closing arguments, switched to a picture taken sometime before December 2nd, 2008, that showed her looking like a regular child, happy, uninjured, laying on the floor, pushing herself up with a huge smile on her face. He also told the jurors, do not forget about all the injuries she had for those 30 hours. He reminded the jurors about the testimony by the medical examiners, by the toxicologist, by the forensic scientist, all of this. He reminded them about the 24 bite marks. He said that it came from Blaine. He reminded them about the evidence, and he closed out saying, quote, once again, it's the way Amora's telling her story. Quote, Blaine Keith Milam did all these things with the intent to hurt Amora. Blaine Milam is a monster. He deserves the ultimate penalty, but he is a monster that Carson brought into the baby's life. Is Carson, Jessica, just as responsible? Yes. Did she have a legal duty to protect Amora? Oh my God, did she ever? So the prosecution, they didn't try to deny that Blaine did it. They didn't really come out and say it, but their whole thing was about blaming it on Jessica. Jessica's the one that brought Blaine into the house. Jessica's the one that didn't help her daughter. It's all Jessica's fault. Yeah, he might have done it, but Jessica's fault. So Jessica's defense team, her attorney, Don Killingsworth, which his last name is Killingsworth. I don't know if that's only ironic to me, but yeah, Don Killingsworth said that Jessica was under the control of Blaine, and Blaine wasn't even Amora's father. Quote, Blaine Milan started to treat Carson badly. You heard evidence of that. For her to be guilty of capital murder, you would have to find it was her conscious objective for Amora to die, and that's not there. You're required to find beyond a reasonable doubt that Jessica Bain Carson was a party to the death of her own daughter. The one thing we are certain about is Blaine Milam killed Amora Carson. So, after 7 days of testimony and more than 3 hours of closing arguments, it took the jury 90 minutes to find Jessica Bain Carson guilty of capital murder. And that carries an automatic life sentence without a chance of parole. On April 13, 2011, this is when Jessica was convicted of torturing and killing her daughter, and she was sentenced to, like I said, life in prison. Blaine was also convicted of killing Amora, and he was sentenced to death on May 27th, 2011. So on February 1st, 2013, Jessica's lawyer appealed the decision based on the jury not submitting any lesser offenses. But the judge said no, because the error of them not submitting lesser offenses was ruled as harmless because of the capital murder conviction. Her attorney also argued that she was, quote, entitled to a jury instruction on mistake of fact because she mistakenly believed that Milan would not harm Amora, and said that the evidence was insufficient to say that she did believe that he would harm Amora. The judge again said no. They came back with another appeal saying, quote, life without parole was cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment because of Carson's youth. The judge said, look, stop wasting my time. It's no. It's just a no. It's a no. Everything you bring forward is going to be a no. Stop it. On January 11th, 2019, Blaine was granted a stay. He was literally supposed to be executed on January 12th, 2019. So the appeals granted the stay and remanded the case to trial court. In this trial court, Blaine and his attorney disputed the bite mark testimony. They said that the evidence was the key to his trial, and the prosecution attributed several bite marks to Blaine. His attorneys also claimed that he can't be executed because he's intellectually disabled. So then they ordered an intellectual disability hearing. As of today, Blaine is still on Polonsky death row, still getting stays of execution. For some reason, he has a lawyer that continues to, I don't want to say for some reason, for money, he has a lawyer that continues to work for him and not let him go through the execution. His mother thinks it's not his fault. According to her, her son was, quote, pulled out of school in the 4th grade. And so because he was pulled out of school in the 4th grade, his brain stopped developing in the 4th grade. Ma'am, that's not how that works. At all, not even a little bit. And apparently he has multiple supporters saying that this wasn't his fault. I believe it was both of their faults. Maybe he did have some kind of mental issues. I don't think his brain stopped working at 12. I think he was doing drugs. Yeah, and clearly his mother, who's saying that, oh, it's not his fault, is also to blame because she wasn't watching her kid while he was out drinking and doing hard liquor and drugs by 16 years old. So his brain could have been damaged. You know, your brain is growing at 16, 15, 14, 13. Your brain is still growing, and then you're putting drugs in your brain. So yeah, he could have had some brain damage. But I more think that it wasn't just that. He seems like a very domineering, overbearing person. And maybe he just didn't want the kid there. I don't know. Maybe he was hallucinating. Either way, the fact of the matter is he was doing drugs. If you have a kid in your house, supposedly that you quote unquote love, you stop doing drugs or you give the kid away to a safe home. That's just it. So I'm not giving excuses. With Jessica, she could have grabbed her baby and left home back to her mom's house once she figured out what kind of person this person was. You need to think of your child first. So before you even fell into this depression, you could have picked up your baby and gone back to your mom's house where everything was so much better for you. I know I'm supposed to remain biased. I know I'm supposed to listen to both sides. I know I'm supposed to have an open mind. But in reality, F all that. Did you hear what happened to the baby? Am I supposed to sit here and think about the adults now? No. I'm thinking about what happened to that poor 13-month-old baby for 30 hours. So no, absolutely not. I couldn't be in the legal profession at all, as you can clearly see. So I guess the poll for this episode is, do you agree that it's somehow not Blaine's fault? Do you agree that it's not Jessica's fault? Do you agree that it was just a psychosis, or for Blaine, it was just mental issues? His brain stopped working at 12 because he was taken out of school or some bullshit. I don't know. We'll just say, do you think the blame should be only on Blaine? Do you think it should be only on Jessica? Or do you think it should be placed on both of them? If I'm able to, I'll even put none in there. So you'll have 4 options. Blaine, Jessica, both or none. Now, if you don't think the blame will be on Blaine or Jessica, so literally I'm telling you should pick both, but obviously it's your choice. But if somehow you choose none, then I don't agree with you. I was going to say something else, but it's a podcast, so I won't say that. But I don't agree with you. And if that makes you angry, then so be it. But it is both of their faults. And for the lawyer and his mom protecting him, screw you both. So that is my poll for you. I don't have any emojis to add today because I can't wrap my head around emojis today. I just can't. So you can either take the poll. I'll also put the poll question on my Instagram, Love Murder Podcast, so you can look at that. And speaking of polls, let's go through some of your comments from the last episode. So the last episode was Exploring the Evidence, the case of the McStay family murders. So the question that I had for the poll was, do you think that Chase was responsible for these murders? And 100% of y'all said yes. The option was yes or no, not enough evidence. And all of y'all chose yes. Now, I didn't read off your comments for the end of season 3 because remember, I took December off. So bit by bit, I want to go back and read them all because I do want to, I love talking to y'all and engaging with y'all. So this one is from Love, Money, and Murder, a horrendous case of parental homicide, the Joel Guy Jr. case. That was episode 123. That was done on November 27th. The poll question was, do you believe Junior's argument that entering his parents' house without a warrant was illegal, or do you think it was justified? If you remember, the police went into his parents' house. They didn't have a warrant. He tried to play that in court. And so that was my question. The choices I gave was it was illegal or the police were justified. And 62.5% of y'all said it was justified and 37.5% of y'all said it was illegal. Then I just asked the general questions of what did you think about this episode? And Cindy Hawk said that it was an awesome episode. Miss Shay 2015 said, I just found you, new subby. Welcome, Miss Shay. Thank you for joining us. I really hope you don't unsub from me because of this episode, which was a really, really hard case, but thank you for joining, Lamb. Monette Hurley said, I love you. I'm thinking the same thing. This guy is trash. Thank you. And Monette, I hope you're thinking the same thing as me on this episode, that both Jessica and Blaine are also trash, and everybody who's supporting them and giving them excuses are also pieces of trash. So, Monet, let me know if you agree with me. And also, before I go, Monet, Miss Shay, Cindy Hawk, and all the rest of my lambs, don't forget that an easy and free way to help Lamb out is by simply sharing this episode. Even if you don't want to join our supporters club, just share this episode. Hit that share button and share with your mom, share with your dad, share with your brother, share with your sister, share with your friends, share on your Instagram, share on your Facebook, share. And as always, I end each episode by reminding you that it's all love and no murder, y'all. And now I am going to go chill with my child and try and erase this from my head before I have to go back and edit it and hear it all over again. Hey, Lamb, before you go, please do me a favor and don't forget to give me a 5-star review. As heavy as this case was, that 5-star review would actually make me smile very much. It'll only take you a couple minutes and that's going to help me out. That's going to put a smile on my face. So whatever platform you're listening on, whether it's GoodPod, whether it's Apple Podcasts, whether it's Spotify or even Spreaker, please just take some time out to give me a 5-star review. And I want to thank you so much for listening and so much for being a part of the Lamb community. All right. Bye.